So our final session of the day, a fireside chat with Jacqui Rock, former Chief Commercial Officer at the NHS. We're going to be looking at lessons in collaboration, innovation, and value creation. But first of all, please give a warm welcome to Jacqui.
Thank you.
So Jacqui, I obviously said former Chief Commercial Officer at the NHS. You left obviously a real senior position to advise on transformation over now in Saudi Arabia. Take us through the decision behind that. What took you over there?
Yeah, indeed. And just to say, thanks for sticking with us, the people that are in the room. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's always the last slot of the day, right? But I'm going to try and make it as interesting as possible. So yeah, in terms of just going back and sort of the journey that I've been really fortunate in my career. I did about sort of 23 years in financial services, and it was in financial services that I first moved into procurement, commercial, supply chain roles, very deliberately. You still hear people say, oh, I just fell into it. I didn't fall into it. I made a very strong career choice. And then I joined the British government about 13 years ago, and as the Chief Commercial Officer in Defence. I was Chief Commercial Officer of Bank of America Merrill Lynch prior to that. Absolutely loved defence. Defence was fabulous. Pandemic hit, and I was asked then if I would, like the whole of the country's response to the pandemic, if I would go and set up the test and trace function to obviously fight the pandemic. And I'd never been in health before. So, from financial services and defence to then suddenly right at the coalface, right there. And, healthcare was, it was absolutely fascinating. So we did the test and trace service. We then set up the UK Health Security Agency. I acted as Chief Commercial Officer, the coup for that. And then I took on the job at NHS England as the Chief Commercial Officer. And absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel very privileged to have held those positions in the British government. And then, over time, one of the things that I'm really keen about, and we'll get into this conversation, is how do you commercialise the NHS? How do you commercialise defence? How do you commercialise everything that's brilliant about the 55 billion of spend that we were doing? So I was quite often going overseas, and I was spending time with other countries. How are other countries doing this? How can I make global collaborations? And that's when I first sort of got very involved with Saudi Arabia. And they are on such a mission to diversify from oil, and their healthcare transformation, which is part of their whole Vision 2030, was just, to me, so fast-paced, so innovative, and just kind of like if anyone said, what's the ideal situation for you to go and lead, that was it. So I am now living in Riyadh and advising the Saudi government on their health transformation.
Fantastic. So obviously, perhaps a bit of a culture shock, obviously, in a move to a completely different country. What have been the most unexpected challenges, though, in adapting your experience to a different healthcare system?
Yeah, and I've had a few overseas gigs before. I lived in the US for quite a while. I've lived in India. I lived in Hong Kong. And so, sort of the cultural differences. But when you're still working with a sovereign state, and you're still working with a public healthcare system, of course there's going to be differences. It's not so much challenges, but you say it's having to adapt. So, for example, in Saudi Arabia, it is, of course it's very hierarchical. It's very command and control, the Crown Prince, all the way down. So, so decisions get made very effectively, very quickly, as opposed to, for example, in the UK, where we might spend a little bit more time in committees and having to go through lots and lots of processes. So that was actually, rather than a challenge, that was very exciting to be able to work in a place that if you put the right business case forward, if you've got the right idea, you will get decisions made at ministerial and senior level very quickly. I think the geographical differences of the Middle East, where you look geographically at where Saudi Arabia is placed, so clearly, and the nature of the climate and the environment. It's hot. It's been 47 degrees for the last 3 months, which is, you just live indoors, right? And it's not the humidity in Riyadh. We've got no humidity, but I feel like my eyes are burning when I go outside. And sandstorms, they're good fun too. But culture, as I say, environmentally, it's different. So when you look at the supply chain and you look at what we have to buy, not only in the healthcare system but right across, we rely really heavily on imports. It's not the same as the UK or the US or Europe. It's very, very different environmentally. So those are just a couple of areas which you have to adapt to, right? And you have to understand very quickly and learn and say, okay, I'm now working in this environment, and therefore this is the advice, and this is how we're going to do it.
Great. You mentioned Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. Could you just tell us a bit more about that and how procurement can play a role in that vision?
Yeah, it's and I think whether you realise it or not, you've probably seen some of it. So Vision 2030 is Saudi's diversification from oil. They're very, very, it's a very, very smart, intelligent, forward-thinking country. And, the way that we use energy nowadays, it's not that oil's running out, it's people's demand for oil. So how do they position themselves to be a major player in the world in other areas? So they launched Vision 2030, which has got quite a few, sort of 6 or 7 major pillars. Healthcare is one of them. But you would have seen, I think a lot of people have heard about NEOM. NEOM is a series of giga projects like no other construction in the world. Some of you might have heard of the Line, which is going to be one particular city in a straight line. It's phenomenal. They're building, they're looking at entertainment and tourism, really. So they're building a new theme park just outside Riyadh. Actually, I on my way to golf, I watch it as it's being built. It's called Qiddiya. It's 4 times the size of Disneyland, right? Walt Disneyland. So it is massive. They've got the whole development of the Red Sea. So, when you look at the Red Sea, on one side, obviously, you've got Egypt. On the other side, that's Saudi. Saudi Arabia owns that. It's never been developed. The diving, the ecosystem is just phenomenal. So, again, they're being very, very thought from a sustainability perspective, from an eco perspective, but an amazing environment for tourism. And then there's the sport. If you're into your boxing, lots of big events are happening in Saudi Arabia now. So they're very focused on sports. They're very focused on concerts. They're very focused on, you've got the World Cup, obviously in 2034. And let's not forget Expo 2030 as well, the World Expo. So there's an awful lot coming, and it's really moving very, very fast. And sometimes it's a little overwhelming. You kind of have to hang on to your seat. From a healthcare perspective, that's a promise to the nation. And a lot of people don't realise that a lot of countries have got this a very large public healthcare system in Saudi Arabia. We've got 22 million people we look after, just like the NHS looks after people in the UK. So, and of course, there's a mix of the private versus the public. But yeah, and the promise there from a healthcare perspective is, again, very, very similar to what the NHS kind of themes were. We want to get people out of hospital. We want community care. We want to bring community into people's homes, hospital care into people's homes. We want to start focusing on prevention rather than treating illness. And of course, and something Saudi Arabia is really good at, how do we leverage everything that we've just been talking about in that last panel, digitalising just people's healthcare experience.
Absolutely, fantastic. So, calling on your vast experience, when you look at other countries and other healthcare systems, what do you see as the big missed opportunities that need to be grasped, I suppose, in procurement transformation?
And I'm particularly interested. I always have. I pay a lot of attention, not only in healthcare, but I'm going to raise it out of healthcare and just talk about procurement and supply chain overall. Just how other countries are doing it. Now, I don't know if any of you've seen what the US is doing, the US federal government at the moment with the GSA. It's quite phenomenal. The president, Mr. Trump, there has been very clear about how they're going to buy across all of their ministries and all their government departments. And it, from a Saudi perspective, from a UK perspective, I'm sitting there and I'm watching. I'm thinking, wow, look at that deal they've just done with Google. Look at that deal they've just done with Microsoft. So rather than each individual department, and we do it in the UK, and we do it others, going off and doing their own buying, it's more complex than that. It's, no, we're all going to, I think his words were, we're going to start running our buying and our procurement like a business. And so it is about centralisation. And as a result of that centralisation, when you look at, for example, software licenses, why would you not buy it on behalf of the entire the federal and every department? And then, if you're the company that's selling those software licenses in, why on earth? I mean, what are you going to say? No? And so the deals they're brokering are amazing. I want that in the UK. I want that in Saudi Arabia. I might be quite controversial. Well, that's good. I like being a bit controversial. People are like, oh, I don't know about, consolidation. Actually, I think when it comes to government buying, it's absolutely what you should do. This is, why wouldn't you? And I think we're all missing a trick there. So that's something I'm particularly focused on at the moment. And just, I personally am researching, going, how do all these countries buy? From a federal sovereign state perspective, because I think people are really missing that. It's we're better when we're together. And of course, there are, in every single country, for example, in the UK, we've got Crown Commercial Services doing an amazing job. I had NHS Supply Chain. There's NUPCO in Saudi Arabia, and I could give you many, many examples. But are we really getting it? Are we really getting it right? Or are we playing around on the edges? So that's one of the big, when I start looking across, that's one of the big opportunities.
Absolutely. We're, of course, living in interesting times, sort of turbulent times for a variety of reasons, and a time of immense transformation, really, across the world. What skills would you say the procurement professional of today, perhaps the next generation of procurement professionals, absolutely must develop in order to sort of stay relevant?
So this comes back to a really interesting debate that I'm sure many of us have. What's procurement and supply chain versus what's commercial? Now, for the NHS and for the Ministry of Defence, I was the Chief Commercial Officer, right? Not the Chief Procurement Officer, the Chief Commercial Officer. And there's always this big debate, what does that mean? Because in some companies, commercial's over there, right? Commercial's about making the deals, and it's, or it might be more sales orientated. I'm a big believer that you need to be able to do both, right? It's not just, people need to stop thinking about themselves as just buyers. They need to start thinking about themselves as creating outcomes, right? Because that, as a chief commercial officer, yes, I've got the complete supply chain. Yes, I've got the buying. But the reason I'm doing that buying is to deliver whatever is strategically important to that company or to that government. And it's us, and it's our voice, and it's how we do that, and it's the deals that we broker, and it's the relationships we make within, not just within our supplier base, but obviously with other partners globally, that really do deliver the outcome. So I think I'm much more keen on people focusing on what does it look like to be a commercial expert, rather than just a procurement expert. I think you need to, because I think we all are anyway, right? You're not just a buyer. You're delivering the outcome. And so therefore, if you're not sat at the top table, why not? I will never, ever take another executive position in any company if the job Chief Commercial Officer, Chief Procurement Officer isn't part of Exco. I feel really strongly about that. I'm fed up with CFOs, sorry if there's any in the room, thinking that the Chief Commercial Officer needs to report into you. You know nothing about it. This is a completely, you know about the money, but this is a completely professionalised skill set that many of us in this room have spent the last 20 plus years, 10 years, 5 years honing and achieving. We're not just finance people. We're not just accounts people. You've got to be at the table. I'm ranting a little now, so I'll let you ask another question, but I feel really strongly about it.
It's great. No, fantastic. Thanks, Jacqui. So if there's one piece of advice then, kind of following on nicely from that, I suppose, that you would give to procurement professionals who maybe just feel a little bit stuck in their current roles with everything that's going on around them, what would it be? Yeah,
so, and it is raising the profile of what we do. If it does feel a little bit, and I so sometimes it can be, it depends on the organisation. If you're in a manufacturing organisation, if you're in a very supply chain heavy, it's probably going to feel very different than if you're in a government organisation where actually it could be, they're guilty of looking at it still as an administration function. So if you are ambitious and you want to get, and you are in one of those organisations and you're banging your head against the brick wall and constantly sort of saying, you need to listen to us, we need to be sat at the table, we need to be part of the business cases, it's not just what's the procurement strategy further down the line. If you just can't get that through, leave, go somewhere else, because there's plenty, honestly, there's plenty of, it's our space right now. I think it's our space over the next, it has been since COVID. World's changed in COVID. The world suddenly saw the value of everything that we do. And I think there's amazing opportunities throughout any industry, any sector, throughout the world to bring our talents forward. So, if it gets a bit stuck, and as I say, it's always about being a little bit creative, being a little bit, pushing yourself out there, pushing yourself forward, coming up with the ideas. But sometimes you're always going to be hitting a brick wall, and I just don't hang around, go somewhere else.
Fantastic. Really fascinating stuff, Jacqui. I just want to quickly check to see if there's any questions from the room at all. That's absolutely fine, because I do have one more question. Oh, sorry. Apologies.
What's the secret of your success then, Jacqui?
The secret of my success, I think, I've always, this is a good question. I consider myself a leader first, and I enjoy that part of my role is the most enjoyable part. I love leading, working, bringing people on. We're a people business as well. And the reason I think, hopefully I'm a successful leader and people are very loyal and want to carry on working for me is because I worked for so many idiots in the past. I've had so many terrible bosses, Still sometimes you can get terrible bosses. I mean, really bad people. And I promised myself really early on in my career, I just will not be like that. And that sometimes I might not have got the roles that I wanted to go for. Sometimes, I've been very authentic I'm an Essex girl. This is how I talk. This is, I'm a woman, and therefore I bring, quite a lot of femininity to the leadership roles. I don't try and be a guy. Right, and it's all these things. I mean, we could go on for hours on this, but I think that it's being an authentic leader. It sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true.
Fantastic.
Hi, Jacqui. Fantastic. I represent MSD UK. I wanted to find out. So, what's the importance of diversifying your supply chain?
Yeah, incredibly important. Supply chains, just from a resilience perspective, again, that's changed, and it's very interesting from a government. When you start going deep into your supply chain and you start going down into levels 3, 4, 5, which of course now we've got the ability to do because we've got the technology, so we can follow it down, and you realise that actually 80% of your supply chain is coming from 1 or 2 countries. So I think that diversification. Not just in terms of source of where the goods and services are coming from, but also diversification of thought, right, and what you're going to get. I'm really enjoying working with some big innovators in China, in Africa, and the thought is different, right? The thought process is different. So again, trying to use different suppliers, trying to bring different suppliers to the table, because that's where innovation comes from, and that's where you're going to get, you're going to be able to. I talked earlier about how we bring solutions to your organisation's overall strategies, and diversification of your supply chain is absolutely the way to do that.
Fantastic. I think we've got one more question.
Amazing, Jacqui. I've not heard of you before. Apologies, but absolutely amazing. But what I wanted to ask was, during the COVID, obviously you dealt with the aspect. How did you deal with the raw materials and building relationships with key suppliers, obviously coming into the role as such?
Yeah. Oh gosh. And we just had the COVID inquiry. It was very tough. It was very tough because these are the questions I was asked, rightly so, by the inquiry. What did you do? How did you do it? How did you know which suppliers to go for? And it was such a unique time in regards to everybody's going after the same thing. Everybody in the world was going after the same suppliers. And so therefore demand, was going absolutely up. How did you negotiate those prices? I had hundreds of thousands of suppliers coming to us saying, we manufacture this, but we can start manufacturing that. You know, what do you need? More lateral flow devices? What do you need, you know, from the vaccination perspective? So it was having everyone around the table, and I kind of miss it, because whilst we were in absolute crisis mode, the innovation and the partnerships with our suppliers was phenomenal. I mean, literally, I'd bring them all in, lanyards at the door, everybody, you know, this is the problem. How are you going to help us? And they did, and it was phenomenal. And I said at the time, and this is one of the things I've said in the lessons learned over COVID and how we brought in COVID, there's some brilliant thought leadership out there on that, on the government website. I said, we must never go back to being more transactional with our suppliers. We must learn how we worked and what we did there. Unfortunately, yeah, I think everyone's guilty of going back to that. This is a transaction. We're the buyer, you're the seller, you know, and you know that's sad. So I try to keep thinking back. What did we do during COVID? What did we do that was different, and still have those relationships with our suppliers like that?
Fantastic. Now I'm afraid we've got to wrap things up now, but thank you so much, Jacqui, for chatting to us. It's been absolutely fascinating. Tim's going to wrap things up in just a moment, but for now, a very big round of applause for Jacqui Rock.
Thank you.